So very excited.
I didn't know it was a girl. I'm so excited.
I know. So very, very good news there, just all around. We've just been doing summer tangs, the fact that it's been warmer, it's been stormier. So the Weather Center has been pretty active in regards to covering extra thunderstorms, but just trying to get outside as much as possible, especially while it's warm and nice.
Yes.
So that's pretty much it. Looking forward to July, though, because we got some vacay coming up, some beach time, and yeah, I mean, who doesn't love the summer,
Yeah.
It's not my favorite month or my season, but I still love just the vibes overall.
Yeah, it's like a classic,
Yeah, everybody gets excited. You're going to bed a little later because the sun sets later.
Yep.
Better to
Vibes
be
are
outside.
high.
Yeah. So all is well over here, and it sounds like all is well over there on that side of the table.
Indeed.
So why don't you get us started with Dead of Autumn by Sherry Knowlton. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about the synopsis here? We already kind of briefly talked a little bit about this when we were kickstarting the month, but get us back on track. Remind us what we're working with here today, Kaylee.
All right. So, as Allie said, this is Sherry Knowlton's Dead of Autumn. It is the first book in a 5, maybe soon to be 6, little tease there, book series by Sherry Knowlton. She is from the mountains in south central Pennsylvania, has lived in south central Pennsylvania pretty much her whole life, and she used a lot of that knowledge in this book here. So it's sort of based on like local lore, local stories, some legends. She kind of takes some places that she knows from her time living in the woods and she went to Dickinson College, I want to say. So some places that she knows from around there and sort of created this like half real, half imaginary world for us to dive into in this book. And it focuses a lot on the babes in the woods, which I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but during the Depression, 3 girls were found dead in the woods, 3 young girls, and then it was linked with a murder-suicide, so that really just, like, swirls throughout the book, so you get a couple different perspectives. It's just a really all-around, it kind of has a little bit of everything,
Yeah, I was going to say that if that is our first point, having it be this all-encompassing murder mystery and also just kind of this understanding of South Central Pennsylvania, I would 100% agree. The Babes in the Woods tie-in was awesome, I thought. I really liked how it kind of broke it up. At first, I was like, oh, what, who are these people? Where are we? I like that she changed up the way it looked in the book, so it was almost like you knew right off the bat that we were going somewhere else. You didn't know if we where at times. I mean, you knew that it was back in the day, everything was dated, but I didn't realize it at first until we got further down the line. And then I was like, oh, okay, here we go.
Wait.
Yeah, so it was interesting to see that perspective, especially because that was a major event that happened here. And being able to kind of see what it might be like to be those kids and to travel like they were traveling and go through the woods. And then at the end, unfortunately, to their demise. We do want to say that we're going to talk a little bit about some touchy subjects with this book. So just some trigger warnings there in regards to domestic violence and then also, the murder of it all. So with this book, that was interesting, I thought, because, sometimes, she did talk a little bit about how she drew inspiration from it, but to see it and then have her almost take her spin on it was really nice to have that alongside just the regular writing of the book, Alexa Williams' story.
Yeah, definitely. And I thought it was really interesting too. She told us when we talked to her that she had taken like some actual excerpts from newspapers and things, like archived content that she found online when this story broke. So it was really cool to sort of see that like historical perspective as well. It wasn't completely made up. It was just like it was based on a real event, but it also had the material from the actual event, which is really, really interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, taking inspiration is one thing, weaving it into the novel is another. With any of those themes. So I thought that was great because it just added more. I mean, it would have been fine if it was just the Alexa Williams Dead of Autumn right there out for you to see, but having that extra element really took it to the next level, I thought, especially because there's a lot happening in this book, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of what's the word? I mean, there's just so much happening and there's so much to uncover that having a little bit of a break and almost being like, okay, so we're trying to figure out who did this and who did that, but now we're having this little break and we're going on this trip and we're here, we're okay, but something doesn't feel right. That really, I thought, was nice to have that change of pace. So I mean, why don't we talk a little bit about just like the sheer craziness that went down in this
Yes.
book?
So it struck me as one of those books that has like a little bit of a slower start, like a lot of world building, a lot of just meet the characters, meet the setting and everything, which was really cool. And then all of a sudden we just like hit the slope and we went boom like through the story, especially like the last 10 pages. We were just talking about that.
Because when you thought it should have ended, you're like, oh, okay, we're at our natural end. No.
No,
We had
there's more.
Yeah, we had more to uncover. And it was what we're basically talking about is this transition from her trusting this casual boyfriend that she's had for a few months, you know, this almost fling, but more so like a situationship, I guess you could say, Caleb. Her finally meeting the family, realizing that something might not be
This family's
right
not for her.
Right, yeah, something might not be on the up and up, and then falling down this rabbit hole of, whoa, like, who do I trust? You know what I mean? And we met a few other characters along the way. Reese was one that we talked a little bit about. I think, like, at parts and at times I didn't trust him either because I wasn't sure if he was
I was like, who do
good.
I trust?
And I know I kind of had that we sat down with Sherry.
Yes.
So we got to hear a little bit behind the author herself and then also behind the characters. So we knew that he wasn't all in all a bad guy. But like still part of me while I was reading was like suspending reality for a little bit, pretending like we didn't chat with her, and was like, ooh, like she's kind of setting him up a little bit, giving him kind of this edge that maybe he could be, you know, the villain of the story. But Alexa is ultimately our main character, right? And she's pretty cool. Like she's got it all together. She's our lawyer. And maybe we should, before we continue, show Sherry's explanation of her and how she came up with Alexa Williams.
Sure.
Alexa as my main character, I wanted somebody who was like a professional. So first of all, so she was smart and ambitious, but also so she had some flexibility. So I made her a lawyer. She could have been something else, but I made her a lawyer. She had spent a lot of time working, although she's from Carlisle, she had spent a lot of time working in New York City, got tired of the rat race, and came home and joined her family firm. And so she's trying to find peace and quiet living in this cabin in the woods. And for those who read the books, they'll find out that she finds no peace and no quiet. I think the main thing about Alexa is that she's sort of somebody who embraces causes, and she just in some ways doesn't know what's good for her. She can't walk away. She's sort of like a grown-up Nancy Drew. With maybe a little grittier maybe, but she just can't walk away.
So as you just heard Sherry say, Alexa, she used to work in New York. She was a big bad lawyer there, and then she comes back to Pennsylvania looking for some peace and quiet. And I feel like that's very common, like to go and then come back. Like I know my own mom, like she went and lived in Philly for a little bit, and then she was like, nah, I'm done with this, and came back to live in like the rural area. So I thought that was really like relatable and really interesting. But then I also loved what she said about Alexa. She just can't give up the cause. Like Alexa is not a detective. She's not a police officer. She's a lawyer. But she like just gets dragged into this tangle and then she can't walk away.
I mean, it just won't leave her alone.
No.
I mean, I think she tries to separate herself. She always is thinking about that woman she finds in Michelle, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the premise. That's where we start off. She and Scout, her dog, kind of, are out enjoying a regular day, pull over, go, Scout needs to go for a walk, go for a run, and then all of a sudden they stumble upon this, deceased person. So part of her was trying to separate herself, but then everything just kept coming up to her. Like it was finding her too. Like I feel like at a certain point when something, when something just keeps like showing up to you and you can't let it go. And you at first thought, okay, like I'm going to move on. I'm going to change my mindset. I'm going to try to, change pace. No, everything was just coming back to Alexa. So I thought it was a nice little partnership. Like, not only was she caring, she, at one point in the book, especially further down the line, she says that she's going to make it her purpose to basically speak for this girl because at first they didn't know who she was. She was a Jane Doe. Nobody was coming forward. You know, they had her likeness in the paper. Nobody was basically saying they knew her or was aware of her. So she felt like she didn't have anybody. And as a result, Alexa wanted to be that person for her. So I thought it was an interesting dynamic there because I was like, yeah, like she's trying though. She's trying to separate. She's trying to dive back into work. She's trying to dive back into her volunteering. So she's trying, but I mean, you just can't. You just can't when it's slapping you in the face. You know what I mean?
I thought it was so funny, or I don't know if funny is the right word, but so like true in a way to like watch her emotions about it change too, because like of course at first she was terrified and sad and all this stuff about finding this dead girl in the woods, this poor girl, but then by the end she's angry. She's like, leave me alone, especially with this like whole militia gang and everything like that. And I love that for her personally. I was like waiting. I was like, okay, when is she gonna say like enough is enough? And she doesn't say enough is enough in the sense that she gets herself out of it, but she's finally ready to stand up for herself and say like, I am done being involved in all of this craziness. And I feel like the turning point for that was really like when she went to confront Caleb at the lodge. But it was just really interesting to like really watch this in real time as Alexa's like going through this, and she's finally like, okay, I'm done. I'm gonna take this into my own hands, and we're gonna figure this out.
Yeah, because somebody has to take the reins.
Yeah.
The troopers, the police, even some of the park rangers were doing as much as possible to try to get the answer. But for her, I think she was having all this other stuff happen on the side, right? Because she was a volunteer, there was things happening at the clinic that she was working at that seemed a little suspicious. And then she kept having these run-ins, just random run-ins with people that just didn't make sense. So she was gathering a little more intel, similar to how Sherry said, she's her own little Nancy Drew, her own little Sherlock Holmes, something that I think that these troopers weren't embarking on. She was kind of getting her own intel, especially because she knew different people in the community. So I think that was an interesting part of the story, is that she didn't just get it because she was a lawyer, but it was a lot of this came from her work at the clinic. And I don't know if you want to speak to that, because she was very passionate about helping women. And that's one of the themes that Sherry mentioned was women empowerment. So that was very big in the book. And I think through that's really where she was starting to gain some understanding of, one, who this girl is, and two, what could have happened to her, especially because there were protesters outside of the clinic, people that would come back daily. There were attacks at the clinic that were happening. Definitely more evidence there than just like at the lawyer office.
Yeah. I was a little bit surprised that like really none of like the information or evidence or like you would expect that to come through her lawyer job, like, oh, maybe she represents like, I don't know, the family of the girl found in the woods, but it pretty much none of it does. Like, it all comes through her work at the clinic, which is something that was very important to Sherry. She used to work with domestic violence victims actually in the state government, and that's a very like prominent theme throughout the novel that really like drives the whole thing. And I think that was a really interesting message. It does get a little bit repetitive. We talked about that a little bit. Like, you sort of get hit over the head with it, but I can't say that that's a bad thing, Like, it's an important message, an important theme, and I think Sherry did a really good job of showing, like, how important these things are.
Yeah, because the other thing that was in the mix with all of this, all of the incidents, was this casual boyfriend, Caleb, that we had mentioned earlier, and his beliefs towards that clinic. They both just weren't on the same page. And I think that was a major thing. I think when you are, in a relationship, you talk more about certain things, like, the things that you don't often talk about just in general conversation. Like, you talk more about politics, about your religious beliefs, about, money sometimes. Like, those are things that just don't come out in casual conversation all the time. So they were not there. They were not past surface level interaction. And that's totally fine. That was where she wanted it to be. But for him, I think when he started to discover these things, it started to fuel the fire. And it started to really cause consternation amongst not just them, but also amongst the congregation that he was a part of. And for that reason, I think that's why it needed to be so repetitive, because you needed to know that Alexa Williams believed this and Caleb did not.
Yeah,
right?
and she was
Like,
not going to compromise her beliefs for him.
right. Because they just weren't there yet. They just weren't that type of relationship.
No. And I have to say, it's a personal, like, pet peeve of mine when the main conflict of, like, a work is just a simple miscommunication or a communication issue, however you want to put it. But I thought that Sherry did it very well in this book because, like, with that vessel almost of their relationship not being on that level. Like, they had been together for a pretty long amount of time, but I shouldn't even say together. They weren't together. But they never had a reason to go below the surface. They weren't serious. They weren't really, like, looking for a future. And I was like, you know what? That's a perfectly reasonable, like, way for that to never happen.
Mhm.
So I liked that, like, yes, while it was a simple communication issue, which sometimes I'm like, man, just, like, talk to each other, you know?
Mhm.
But it didn't strike me as an issue in this book. I thought that it made perfect sense with the plot and with the nature of their relationship. Like, they knew each other just enough that, like, they knew each other's cars, that becomes an issue. They know where each other live, that sort of thing, but, like, they don't get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah. And, you know, this is the other thing that communication, as you mentioned, can really take it to the next level, right? Because he didn't communicate, hey, I'm ready to be more serious. He ends up deciding, hey, I want her to meet my parents. And she was kind of down for it. But that's where things really start to take a turn. I think that was in the book, in the novel, that's where things started to get interesting. Let's just say that. Because when she goes to meet his parents at Kingdom Lodge in Perry County, they were really firm in their beliefs. He was a minister, his father's a minister, and then he kind of is coming from this line of ministers. So there's a little bit more responsibility there for him because his father is literally the leader of the congregation. And then you kind of get to know his friends, you kind of get to know who his friends are married to or dating, and you just kind of see what it's like because not only did he not know her, but she doesn't know him. So you're starting to understand, okay, this is the first time we're really seeing who Caleb is. And there's nothing wrong with that at first, but she was just, she just didn't know what she was expecting, right?
Yeah, and, like, I personally wasn't expecting, like you said earlier, like, you suspected Reese at first more, because you're always going to suspect the people that come in, like, a little bit later, but, like, I had no indication that Caleb was anything other than, like, a perfectly normal guy until they went to this lodge. But then I think what really, like, the one single thing that tipped me off that maybe he's not a good guy before that excursion is that Scout hates him. Scout cannot stand Reese. The dogs are always right. The animals are always right.
Right. Oh my goodness. You hit the nail on the head right there with that.
Yes. And, Scout is a pretty big character in the book. So I think now we'll hear what Sherry has to say about Scout.
I mean, Scout the dog is a big character too. He's an English Mastiff, and he's based on a series of English Mastiffs that my husband and I had over the years. So he's just this big, lovable dog who is always around.
So yeah, Scout is this giant English Mastiff. He is Alexa's best friend, and I have to say, I was sad when he got cut, and I was nervous when he got his little cut, his little boo-boo, and he couldn't be there to protect Alexa. But I was happy because I was like, if they come for her, like, Caleb was coming for that dog, and then, surprise, spoiler alert, they did, but the dog wasn't there.
I think anybody who has a pet, whether it's a cat or even, like, any kind of animal that you share a relationship with is going to defend you to the death, I think, personally. Scout he was just loving. He was cool with everybody for the most part, but not this Caleb guy. And I thought that was a really interesting take. Now, what Kaylee just mentioned was further down the line, there's some not only attacks at the clinic, but also attacks at her cabin. Okay. She comes home. It looks like somebody tried to break in. Scout cuts himself, and then, he's out of commission for a few weeks, really. He has to live at her parents' house because it's just a little bit more conducive to the actual injury, and he needed to rest. So she was kind of open for the taking. Like, anybody could have come and caused trauma or caused anything. So that was a little scary, not
Yeah.
having him around. I also really resonated with when she said that the cabin felt really empty without him there.
Yeah.
Because I feel the same way. Like, if the dogs are getting groomed or something, I have 2 dogs, so I'm a dog person, but I know, like, cats are the same way. Like, if your cats are at the vet or.
Even I have a little tiny bunny, like a 3-4 pound
Yes,
bunny.
I was going to say.
And he was gone for like 8 hours, not even a whole day, but 8 hours while he was getting neutered. And I, like, every time I, like, dropped something or made it, because, you know, rabbits are a little bit scaredy cats, but I would turn around and be like, oh, Riff, are you okay? And he wasn't there. And I was like, where, my heart? Like, part of me is missing.
I
Like,
know.
it's just this bond that you have.
So I like that he was her, you know, her ride or die, basically. You know how, like, Batman has Robin?
Yes.
That was her Robin, I
Yes.
think. And I loved that relationship. Now, it's interesting to see as we go forward, you know, not only, so there were a lot of characters, but there's only a few that really stand the test of time. And we've kind of been mentioning Reese, right? Reese starts to get a little bit more acquainted with her. Reese is a park ranger, and we'll show you what Sherry has to say about him in a little bit. But he starts to become more friendly with her. He's new to the area, but he's familiar with the area. You know, there's a lot of local ties with him. And they start to connect a little bit more. Like, they start to talk a little bit more about those things below the surface, as we mentioned. Huge character development difference, I think, is the fact that she's just so much more comfortable with Reese as
And
opposed to Kim.
Scout is more comfortable.
Yeah, the true test of time. Scout loves him right off the bat, gets good vibes. So that was nice because that we start to weave him in a little bit more. Caleb's still there, you know. There's nothing like nefarious happening. They're just friends. They're talking about the case. She can actually open up to him about the case. Caleb's still there, but he's just becoming more of a friend. So let's see what Sherry has to say about Reese here.
One of the main characters that weaves through several of the books is a park ranger named Reese, who she meets, and eventually he becomes her boyfriend, and they have an on-again, off-again relationship.
So I loved, Sherry told us that people will come up to her in books or at book signings, bookstores, whatever, whenever she's doing events, and they'll say, please do not kill Reese. And I love that. I think that's so awesome. Like, that's how you know, I think, that you've created a good character. And we haven't gotten to see a whole lot of Reese yet. Like, I know that there's the whole rest of the series, and I do plan to read it, but I thought it was really interesting that she said that, because at the end of Dead of Autumn, I was like, oh, okay, like, Reese is a cool guy, but, like, he didn't stand out to me like that. So I was like, oh, like, I can't wait to see his character development.
Right. He was like an underlying support.
Yeah.
And I think that was great for a first novel, right?
Yeah.
Because he was just starting to get in there. He wanted to make sure she knew that she could go to him for anything. He just cared about how she was feeling, which sometimes that's all you need. And, like, a quote partner in the early stages is somebody that's just like, I'm on your side. If you need to talk about something, I'm here. A lot's been going on. How are you? Little things like that. So that's where I saw him. As we got further and further into the book, and, you know, we say goodbye to Caleb and kind of introduce Reese, things become a little bit more, you know, like a little bit more serious. And they were starting off serious pretty quickly, because she kind of mentions him as the on and off boyfriend. So I'm not really sure how things go forward, if they fight in the next series, or if they are, like, completely broken up, or if someone else moves in. I don't know what happens from here on out. But they seem pretty stable by the end, at least in their deciding that they want to take it slow and then, you know, see where things go. But he was really great too, because he just remembered things about her.
That's so sweet.
Yeah. So as we continue through the book, you start to realize, okay, there must be a connection between Caleb's family, the attacks at the clinic, and then overall this murder that happened, right? And so with that being said, things started getting a little suspicious, right?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to Caleb Brown and his family, if you want to elaborate.
Yeah, so we start to, like, get an inkling that Caleb might somehow, or Caleb's family or his congregation, something, might be involved in the nefarious things that are going on in this little woods town. So Alexa finally makes the connection when she sees one of Caleb's friends' wives protesting outside the clinic, when before it had just been, like, a group of, just to her, random people. So she starts to think, oh, like maybe something's up here, and then it seems like very quickly after that, her suspicions are confirmed, and she's like, oh no, I gotta get away from this guy.
Mhm.
It doesn't work.
Because we're not talking about just, so at first they were sending these nasty letters and these nasty notes to the clinic. And, it's threatening, but nothing had actually happened yet.
Yeah.
Then it got serious because when one of the doctors was leaving, he was shot essentially on his way to the car. And it wasn't fatal, but it was pretty bad. He was in
Yeah.
critical condition for a
Right
while.
in the chest.
Yeah, in the chest. And it was like one of those where if it was just over slightly, it would have been a different story. So that's the kind of behavior we're talking about. We're not just talking about, like the protesting, because protesting, I mean, you can protest. That they would say that during the book. The workers at the clinic and the volunteers would always be like, I mean, they have the right to protest. It's unfortunate that we have to walk by it every day and come in and then see them, and then the poor people that have to come in who just are coming for their like regular visits are, having to endure it. But it is what it is. They always would say that it is what it is. Now, when it became physical and people were, being harmed, that's totally, different. And like you said, finally it started to connect that one girl was visible, and she was like, oh my gosh, I knew that girl.
Mm-hmm.
I remember her. Now, that didn't happen until the other person got hurt. Now, before this other person got hurt, they tried to bring in a security team. And then, it worked, it helped, but they were basically going back, and they were going back for Alexa, because Alexa basically shut down Caleb
Mm-hmm.
in the biggest way possible. Like, he thought like, oh, we can make this work. Like, he basically wanted to get married to her and like, bring her to the light.
Yeah,
I guess
he's like,
is
you
what-
met my folks, we're good.
Yeah.
I was right there. Like,
Yeah.
the wedding's set up.
Literally. And then she basically, because of her strong beliefs and because about how they didn't align, said, hey, this isn't going to be for me. I'm not going to be able to do this relationship anymore. It never was like that for me, unfortunately. And so she's basically saying she wants to go her own way, which she was very strong. I was pretty impressed in the way that she would talk to him, basically saying, this is over. Please leave me alone.
Yeah, and he needed to hear that a couple times. I wouldn't say it worked, considering he's chasing her through the woods at the end of the novel, but it was very inspiring. Like, I feel like a lot of people, women especially, have gone through that, having to set those very clear boundaries multiple times. So I thought that was very real. Like, she was really trying her best, and he just wouldn't leave her alone. And it really all comes to a head when he sees her coming home one day, and he and his friends decide, like, well, now's our chance, because they know that she's the one that found this body, and they know, or have a good suspicion, that she also saw the guys coming back from hiding the body. So they're like, we gotta neutralize this threat.
I know, which is insane. And, it seems crazy when you're hearing it off the cuff like that, but they've done this before. And like, that's why it doesn't seem so far-fetched for them, because they're like, well, this isn't our first rodeo. We have to figure out a way to keep ourselves safe, keep the congregation safe, and then also make sure that, we don't have any more of her spreading her beliefs, which is like, they're like, it makes sense, it's like two birds, one stone, essentially.
Yeah.
But what Kaylee was talking about and alluding to was basically after realizing that she knew more than they even thought she did, they decide we're going to murder her. That's what's going to happen. So they go again, and this is the same people that tried to ransack the cabin in the first place. So they know exactly where they're going. They know exactly where she is. They see her on the road. They try to run her off the road, and they say, hey, you know what? We're just going to meet her at the cabin, and we're going to do it there, and we're just going to all go. They step up. They give her a chance. They say, hey, this is like, this is your chance to just come out. We can settle this. We can move on. It'll be fine. She's just, she's like, no. And they're like, all right, we're coming in. And thank God Scout wasn't there, because again, like you said, they were going to take him out first, which she was like, oh, she was so mad when she heard them say that. She was like, it's game over now. And she ends up flinging herself, jumping out of the second story window, but Sherry did say that, you know, it's on a hill. So
Yes.
it wasn't too far off. It was
She didn't
maybe like
break
4 or
anything.
5. Yeah. So she was able to run through the woods around her cabin to find safety. Now it took her a while because I mean, it was in the dark. It wasn't a full moon, as she mentioned, so she couldn't really see. She was tripping here and there, running into things, and they were close. They were gaining on her.
She actually like got grazed by a bullet. Like they were very, very close.
Yeah. And she was just trying to find, I don't know, I think your fight or flight starts to kick in and you're just like, I'm trying to get to the main road. Like I got to get to the main road. Then that didn't work out and she had to shift gears, and then she remembered this spot that she had actually shown Reese earlier in the novel, which was a nice tie-in as well to the Underground Railroad, right?
Yeah, Sherry said that. So she had told us that some of these places, like I mentioned earlier, like they're real, but maybe not where you find them in the book. So there's this little chapel just like in the middle of the woods that Sherry told us is very real and is like within a couple miles of her house. And there's also this Underground Railroad hideout that is near her Dickinson College campus. So she sort of like meshes these two things together, and that is where Alexa hides for, I think, all night, really. And she's like, okay, like, I don't think anybody else knows about this. Reese said that he only found it because a trooper or a park ranger showed him, something like that. So, like, it's secluded, it's under a bush, nobody really knows about it. So she's hiding in there, and she can hear the people chasing her, like, talking about how to kill her, which is horrifying. But she makes it through. She's good. She is shot at that point, but she's okay. It was just a graze. And then Reese finds her, which, again, like, just coding him as, like, the good guy, the savior,
Yeah, he
everything.
remembered.
Yes.
He remembered that they were taking that hike one afternoon on a Sunday after his shift, and she showed it to him, and she was like, oh, yeah, like, I know this. And he was like, yeah, I know this. And then together, they finally found her. I mean, it was scary for a while because I don't think the family knew that she was alive yet or had found... Like, they found the boys, right? Like, Caleb and all his friends, like, slowly but surely, they all were getting arrested. Because she had formed this pretty good relationship with the police at the time. She would be able to call the trooper on his cell phone. She was keeping tabs, which I thought was smart. She was always calling 911. It was kind of a lot because, you know, she was just trying to always get updates, I think. And, like, I'm like, okay. But it honestly helped her in the end. You know what I mean? Because, like... Updates are one thing, your safety is another. You know what I mean? So they just knew her number. They knew who she was. They knew where she was living. Like, they had formed this almost like partnership, we'll say, by the end. So then they knew, okay, we need to take this seriously, because not only did we have this murder happen and this body show up in Michelle, but we also had her clinic get attacked. And now we're seeing this kind of connection between, you know, the murder and this clinic. And, oh, wait, what were you wearing the night that other employee got shot? You know what I mean? Because it looks like she was wearing the same thing. And so it all comes to a head at the end. And she's safe. We're good. She's hanging out with the family. Everybody's worried about her. And then they're like, you know, we're just going to relax. But then there's 3 more chapters or 4 more chapters. I forget what it is. And I'm like, oh my God,
we're kind of wonder. You're like, what's gonna what could happen at this point? A lot.
Yeah, a lot. Truly a lot. Because the other underlying thing was that not only are we worried about Caleb and his buddies, but the dad, Caleb's dad, is actually the biggest person to fear, I think, overall. Because he actually was the one who was committing most of these crimes.
Yeah, and he was like commanding Caleb and his friends like a little army. Well, I mean, that is part of the book too, is that there's this secret militia, and it turns out to be this congregation that this guy leads. But you find out that this isn't the first girl that he's murdered, and isn't the first girl that he's commanded people to murder. And he shows up at Alexa's door to murder her.
Willingly, for the good of the cause, right? Like, he thinks that this is going to, you know, she was the reason her son got, you know, put in jail, and she has all these crazy beliefs, and it's, you know, your time has come, you know? And what was interesting is that she also had the wife there, Caleb's mom, essentially, be there. So, self-defense, Alexa had to basically fight him off, and the wife was actually trying to tell him to stop.
Yeah.
And in the end, Alexa overpowers him, and she actually has her own shotgun in the house, and basically she ends up killing him, which is, it's sad because the wife's there. It's a very emotional scene, but you're also just kind of, I don't know what's going to happen next. Oh my gosh, I can't believe he's here. This random knock on the door. I was like, oh my gosh,
like, Alexa, don't open the door.
Yeah, literally. It was like one of those scenes where you're just, oh no, who's there? And I didn't even think that he was going to come either. So
I didn't either. I thought it was Reese on the other side of the door.
It could have been anybody, literally, at that point, because there was already so many twists and turns and so many incidents, like in the dead of the dark. You know what I mean? I'm like, it could be literally anybody showing up. So that was a really interesting thing to throw in at the end. And then she came out victorious. And you know what? The wife actually was saying to her, you know, even though she stood by her husband, she was like, I understand why you did it. I understand you were, you know, I understand you're trying to do what you want to do. I fully don't even believe the same thing he believes, but he's my husband, so I'm trying to stand by him. So there was an interesting at the end moment, because what Sherry was talking about too when we went and sat down with her at the Redland Community Library is that a lot of times, or oftentimes in her career, she found that the abuse that would happen or occur would be with somebody who's closest to you in your family, or like a partner or somebody like that. So I think that harkened back to that a lot, because this woman who seemingly was all good, seemingly happy, seemingly all aboard, was actually not, because she was just trying to stand by him and keep him happy. And I think that was in a almost like an abuse tie-in as well.
Yeah, and the one line that, I think the wife's name was Rebecca, the one line that she says really broke my heart was she said that she was just raised to obey her husband. Like, that's all she knew. And she sort of has like an inkling that maybe he's not right. Maybe they shouldn't be murdering these people, but she just doesn't know like how to stand up for herself, how to keep herself safe if she were to do that. And I just think that's very like emblematic of what Sherry saw herself in these 20 years in state government, working with these domestic violence victims and all of that. And I do think it was very important for her to put it in the story.
Mm-hmm. And it was, the theme began as quickly as it started the book, right? With the first Jane Doe who popped up. Then we always have the three babes tying through the book until the end. So those girls who didn't know what to do, who were noticing things but couldn't stand up for themselves because they were so young. Then we even had a little flash of something with Alexa and Caleb, just the way he treated her, especially in certain instances in her house and her home where she thought she was in control and she really wasn't. And then it almost comes to a head and finishes out with this woman who's been in a relationship with this man for years, you know, having this healthy, quote, marriage. So we saw different aspects. We saw a younger girl, maybe in her 20s, right? Then we saw these young girls that actually is a true story. Then we have somebody who has kind of this flash in the pan experience. And then we have somebody who's been in a marriage for years and years and years, and there's this underlying form of domestic violence. So I thought that was very interesting. And honestly, she said it and I saw it. You know what I mean? It was one of those things where once she pointed it out, it was right there for you to see. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So, okay. Overall, what would you rate this book?
Overall, I would say it's a 3. I told you, I think it would be a great Netflix series, especially because not only do we have this book, but we have 3 others, and we have the 3 other seasons, and then we have an additional book that takes us to Africa. So it's part of that 5-book series. I think it would be awesome for that, because this just screams like Netflix or like some sort of Hulu so I thought it was great in that regard. I think she mentioned too, while we were there, some of the writing, she always is trying to like bring her writing to Hemingway. She thinks that's the epitome of crispness. So I saw what she meant there. A little things got a little wordy or a little verbose, but I didn't lose it in the overall story. I thought the overall idea was great, and I think it's a great read for somebody who wants something a little bit more mysterious, a little bit more fun, and also wants to be a part of this girl's journey, because you can start here and then you can keep going, you know?
Yeah.
How about you?
Okay, so I think I have to agree with the 3. I do think, like you said, like it's a little bit like it reads like an author's first novel, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I think too my perspective might be a little bit colored because I've been reading Sherry's travel memoir as well, and the difference in writing style, just flow, like you can tell that she's written a lot more between this book and the travel memoir. So that might be coloring my vision a little bit, but it reads well. Like it's fine. It's just, yeah, like I said, like very much a first book. But also, I do like you said, that she brings home the message. Like it can get a little bit repetitive, but like you know exactly what you're reading. Like you know sort of what you're looking for, sort of where this will go. But on the flip side of that, like I wasn't expecting the ending at all. I felt like throughout the book I could guess like sort of a lot, maybe not a lot, but I could guess pretty much what was going to happen. But then the end, like that came out of nowhere for me. I had absolutely no inkling that any of that was going to happen, and that took me by surprise in like a really good way. I almost feel like the last, I don't know, 50 pages maybe of the book were like the best part for me.
Yeah, because we had to do a lot of groundwork to get to where we needed to be. And I think that's part of every mystery novel too, you know what I mean? Because it all has to tie in together at the end. You can't have these people and then all of a sudden they all, you know, they're the murderer. You know what I mean? Like it's part of the fabric of the way they're written, I think. And I think that in those last 50 pages, they were chock full. It was just one after the other, like, what's going to happen next? Yeah. So I totally agree with you there. And I think that, you know, looking back, I know we were like, oh, we might want to read. Because what was the one we talked about? Dead of Spring, right?
Yes.
So that one was one that one of the librarians had also said, you know, if you don't read, you know, Dead of Autumn, Dead of Spring is a good one too. So I can see that, like as each book, you know, the style just starts becoming fermented. The themes start becoming part of the novel. And she said that when we talked to her, each book has their own set of themes. So, you know, they won't look exactly like this one, and you'll meet new characters, and she gets in her flow. You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially like I feel like now that a lot of the groundwork is laid, like we know who Alexa is, we know who Scout is, we know where she lives and blah, blah, blah. Like now that all of that is done in this first book, I feel like the rest of the books that follow might be a little bit more concise or flow better, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and we can just focus on some of those, you know, external themes instead of like, okay, we need to just pack all this info. So overall, fab.
Yes, great
Loved.
book.
And I thought it was so good to kickstart summer with. I was like,
Yes.
I know we're getting into the autumn, and that was a big thing with this one is like, you know, us being here in South Central Pennsylvania, I'm like, I know these places. Like I feel like
Yes.
I'm one with this novel. So it got me excited for fall. I'm not going to lie.
No, I
Like,
have
that's
to
my
agree.
favorite season. She's talking about the leaves changing. She's talking about the chill in the air. So I think this is a great one to add to your summer reading list, just to get something different in there.
Yeah.
And to also highlight this area, which she said not a lot of books do. And it makes it interesting in that aspect, especially if you live here, because it just feels like you can connect with it a little bit more. But if you want to learn more about Sherry Knowlton, we have that full Meet the Author piece over on our website, FOX43.com. You can check that out and not only see the package, but you also wrote up a nice little article about her to kind of get the idea of what we're talking in terms of her career, her government career, how long that spanned, and then when she kind of broke off to write more and where she is now. And she did mention that she's writing another Alexa Williams novel. She's in the works with that. So hopefully we hear more about that soon. But why don't we talk a little bit about what's up next? So everybody, if you have any comments, questions, feel free to drop them down below. This is going to be posted on Fox 43's Facebook page and also on the Fox 43 Book Club page. So if you want to continue to keep the conversation going about Dead of Autumn, feel free to do that there. But we have our next book coming in hot. So Kaylee, do you want to tell the people about what we have for the month of July?
Yes. So our upcoming book, it's called Ruby Fruit Jungle, and it was written by Rita Mae Brown. She grew up in York. She actually said at one point that she got her very first library card at Martin Library, so yay for local connections. We had Jill from Martin Library in here earlier to introduce it. Thank you very much to Jill. But this book is really about a young girl in the South who is, it's a coming of age novel. But she's trying to figure out who she is, who she likes. She figures out that she is gay, and that's not acceptable in the South at the point that she is living there. So it's really about her journey to accepting herself and figuring out how to live, I think. So we're very excited to read that. We wanted to get it in while Pride Month is still going on. So it is our July read, but it's June right now. So
yeah,
yay.
we're wrapping up Pride Month on a really good note here, so we can see what's going on with this novel. Now, our discussion is still going to be the last week of July, correct? So we're going to talk a little bit about that then, but we always are posting over on Facebook, so make sure that you join the FOX43 Book Club Facebook page. Feel free to like it, follow along, because we keep you up to date. We talk a little bit about what's going on, about the reading process, where we are at. You can discuss where you are at, maybe even ask us any questions. We had somebody ask us a little bit about how we choose the novels every week, or every month rather, and Kaylee does that. So like, shout out to Kaylee.
I love questions.
Yeah.
Ask me questions.
Yeah, so make sure that you connect with us there. Social media is always great because you can throw it out there and then multiple people can have a little bit of a conversation, a discussion about it. And that's what we're here to do, to just inspire people to get into the reading mindset, into the spirit of local literature, and also some of our local librarians, give them a little spotlight to showcase what they've got cooking. So we'll be talking about this. Hopefully we can continue to keep up our Meet the Author segments. So we'll see what's to come. And I mean, I think that's pretty much a wrap on today's discussion. So make sure you pick this up, folks, because we're going to be talking about it, and I'm excited to see